Okay, welcome back. It's 2 p.m. Amsterdam time, so we said we would start and finish also on time. Welcome to our next speaker on advanced therapies and support to innovation. Anna Tavridou is in the Scientific Evidence Generation Department, and she's going to talk about this specific topic of innovation and our most innovative therapies, the advanced therapies. Anna, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks, Agnes, for the introduction. Welcome to this afternoon session. I hope you are not very tired, as I believe it will be very interesting to listen to what EMA does to support innovation for and also advanced therapies development. I will start with some learning objectives, and with the first one, according to the definition of the EU legislation, what is considered an ATMP, and how these products are authorized in the EU. So I would like to start by saying that ATMPs have the potential to reshape the treatment of a wide range of conditions, especially in oncology, hematology, cardiovascular system, and also where most of the development takes place and the clinical trials are conducted. You can see here that the ATMPs are broadly divided in three categories: the gene therapy medicinal products, the somatic cell therapy products, and tissue engineered products. And these are regulated as medicinal products. In case of transplant or transfusions, of non-substantially manipulated cells, then these are not considered ATMPs, for example, bone marrow transplants. And there is certainly lots of discussion about and hopes about stem cells. These can be categorized as ATMPs when they undergo substantial manipulation or they are used for a different essential function. Now, I would like to provide an overview of what are the main differences between what we consider traditional medicines and advanced therapies. And let's start with the administration of these products. In case of a small molecule, we have a continuous administration in the long term, whereas for ATMPs, usually we have a single shot or just few administrations, and this is expected to last for a very long period of time, if not for the entire life of the patient. Where a medicine can be given, if it's a small molecule, this can be taken at home easily or in a GP practice or in a hospital. But in case of ATMPs, these are administered in specialized treatment centers. The small molecules are easy to copy, but for the ATMPs, it's extremely difficult to copy a treatment because there is a whole process that leads to the product, which is quite difficult to reproduce. In terms of costs, you know that the small molecules are relatively cheap, and the cost of the medicine is spread over a long time. But for ATMPs, the cost is usually very high, and this needs to be paid at the very early stage. In terms of access to market, the traditional medicines usually are reimbursed soon after their approval, but for ATMPs there may be some delays because of the high costs and challenges for HTAs and payers. And finally, when we administer when we take a traditional medicine, usually we can reverse the treatment, we can stop it, and after hours, weeks, any activity will disappear. But if we are non-responding to an ATMP, then this is not reversible, because we have already an effect on our cells, on our tissues, that this is not reversible. Now, since the start, the implementation of the ATMP regulation in 2009, we have approved, the EMA has approved 15 products, 8 gene therapy products, 3 somatic cell therapy products, and 4 tissue engineered products. However, 5 of these products have been withdrawn from the market, mainly for commercial reasons. We also have 7 ongoing marketing authorization procedures, especially for gene therapy medicinal products, and we expect approximately 15 more applications for marketing authorization from now till the end of 2021, also mainly for gene therapy medicinal products. And we will look into a bit more detail on the different classes of advanced therapy products. And we will start with gene therapy products, which can treat inherited disease. We can target cancer, different types of cancer, or tissue regeneration, for example, loss of sight. And these are products that consist of a recombinant nucleic acid administered to patients with a view to regulating, repairing, replacing, adding, or deleting a genetic sequence. And the effect of these products can be therapeutic, it can be prophylactic, or it can be diagnostic. And we can give some examples of these products, which are broadly divided in vivo gene therapies and ex vivo gene therapies. Zolgensma is a product that it's been authorized for the treatment of spinal muscular atrophy, and is based on a recombinant viral vector, which expresses the gene, the SMN gene that is defective in this disease. So we administer the vector with the gene sequence, and this gene is translated to the protein that is missing. Whereas Strimvelis is an ex vivo gene therapy that it's been authorized for severe combined immunodeficiency caused by a deficiency in a protein called adenosine deaminase. And this therapy is based on removing stem cells from the patient and transducing these cells with a retroviral vector that encodes for the human gene that is problematic in this case. I will go into the cell-based medicinal products, and see here you can see a wide range of diseases that can be targeted, like immune disease, neurological disease, cartilage defects, cardiac repair, skin replacement, and cancer immune therapy. And these products consists of cells or tissues that have been subjected to substantial manipulation, and therefore they have there are changes in their characteristics and their function relevant to the intended clinical use. Or the cells or the tissues that are not intended to be used for the same essential function in the recipient and the donor of the cells or tissues. And an example of such a therapy is Alofisel. This has been approved for treatment of complex anal fistulas in adults with Crohn's disease. This therapy is based on mesenchymal stem cells removed from fat tissue of adult donors, and the cells are selected, they are cultivated in the laboratory, and then they are injected into the walls of the fistula, where they can help to reduce the inflammation and therefore support the growth of new tissue. And let's move on to the tissue engineered products, which consist of engineered cells or tissues, and they are administered with a view of regenerating, replacing, or repairing a human tissue. And here you can see an example of an authorized product, Holoclar, which is based on expanded autologous corneal epithelial cells, and is used for treatment of adult patients with moderate to severe limbal stem cell deficiency due to ocular burns. And I will move into the EU legislation that covers advanced therapies. There is a regulation, specific regulation for advanced therapies that covers tissue engineered cell therapy and gene therapy products. And this new legislation that was drafted in 2007 and came into force into 2009, set up a new expert committee, the Committee of Advanced Therapies, to complement the expertise of the CHMP, which is the committee that approves what we call traditional medicines. And also the new regulation provided incentives for developers of advanced therapy products. It also provided the definitions that I just mentioned for the different types of products, details about the authorization procedure, and also a description of what is considered a hospital exception. Some highlights of the ATMP regulation is that these products are authorized in the EU via the centralized procedure, and the principles of the existing legislation on medicines apply to advanced therapies, as the marketing authorization, the demonstration of quality, safety, and efficacy, the good manufacturing and good clinical practices, and also the post-authorization vigilance and risk management plans. Now, here you can see what happens with the evaluation of such products. The EMA receives a dossier that this is evaluated by the Committee of Advanced Therapies and the CHMP, and they may conclude on a positive benefit risk opinion and issue this, and this will lead to the marketing authorization by the European Commission based on a decision. After the marketing authorization, we have the HTAs and the payers that need also to make their assessment and conclude on whether the product, the ATMP, will be reimbursed and therefore will reach the patient, which is a very important step. And in the evaluation process, we also have the PRAC involved, as there is an evaluation on the safety aspects of the advanced therapies, both in the pre-authorization and also in the post-authorization phase. So, do all ATMPs require a central marketing authorization? There are cases where this can exempt according to a hospital exemption procedure, and there may not be a need for a central marketing authorization if the ATMP is custom-made, if it's not routinely manufactured, and if it is only administered to an individual patient. If it is used within the member state where it is manufactured and not in other member states. And in this case, it is under the responsibility of a medical practitioner, the administration of the product. And with these hospital exceptions, we have seen quite a few problems due to different national interpretations on the above.
I have a question on the
Yeah.
the chat box, which is: can an application be submitted to EMA with data from hospital exemption use other than from clinical trials? If you're addressing your presentation, you can postpone, but just.
No, I don't think I'm going to refer to this later. As far as I know, and Agnes, you can correct me, we can accept hospital exception data as supportive for a marketing authorization.
Yeah, I agree, because it's more a principle than the specifics of the ATMPs. In practice, hospital exemption would be sort of not a trial. It would be like compassionate use or a sort of open label data, non-comparative, which may be actually justified depending on the disease and in particular its rarity. But in terms of demonstration of efficacy and safety, this may not be enough. So certainly if this was the intention of the manufacturer and the company or the academics preparing this product, they should go and seek scientific advice to make sure that there is agreement that this data would be acceptable as such. So this is not a completely black and white answer, but certainly something to be discussed and agreed, because otherwise the risk is that we say, no, it's not a demonstration, we cannot accept it. We will look at the data, but we will not consider it as you said, it will only be supportive, it will not be a demonstration.
Exactly.
Over.
Exactly. Thank you. So here you can see what I just mentioned, that following a positive opinion by the EMA for a product to be authorized, then it goes to the Commission, where and in a process called decision-making process, which lasts approximately 2 months, the product receives the final approval. So the key messages from this first part of my presentation is that ATMPs are medicinal products based on cells or genes. They are very different from traditional medicines based on chemicals or even biological products. The ATMPs are authorized in the EU via the centralized procedure where one application leads to one marketing authorization which is valid in all EU member states and the EEA countries. And there is specific legislation for ATMPs. The ATMP regulation is in place since 2009, but certainly the pharma legislation applies unless specified differently in the ATMP regulation. And I will stop here and will take questions on this first part. Thank you.
So
if there are any.
We have more questions. Are you clear on the... that's coming. Please, go on.
Is hospital exemption national? Well, I understand, this is not my expertise, but I understand that member states may have different conditions for hospital exemptions, different requirements, and this may result in some discrepancies, and so it's not uniformly agreed and applied throughout the member countries. Who gives approval for that kind of use? Do you mean for hospital exemption use?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes, this is at the level of member states. It's not at the AMA level, as far as I know.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, we know that some member states have, for example, introduced restriction on who can manufacture, because there are conditions to make sure that these products are actually GMP compliant. You need a number of conditions. Plus, in addition, many of them are use genetically modified organism, and there are conditions for the use, the manipulation, and the release in the environment of such product. In practice, it's not something that you do on the corner of a table. It is actually we know that some member states have hospital where you have a center who can produce and manufacture such product, and they have cost millions, because you also need a special air in the building, you need a special sewage, you need a sterile environment. So it's actually quite complex, and as you said, they are not traditional chemicals. So really the management of this product is a specialized business. And yes, they can be authorized at national level, or they can be manufactured, but they still have to fulfill a number of criteria. Over, back.
Yes, thank you. And they need to be traceable also. Yes, there are several issues. Are those sites inspected before use? Well, I would assume they are not, the inspection, I would assume there is an inspection conducted at a national level. I don't think that the EMA is involved in coordinating the inspections in this case.
No, we would not be, because these are a largely pre-approval or pre-submission steps, but we will check that there is a GMP compliance.
Any other question on this first part?
Maybe you can
If
continue.
there are no questions, yes, I will move into the second part of the presentation, where the objective is to make you aware of the challenges faced by the regulators for assessment and authorization of innovative medicines. And here you can see a list of challenges for regulators when we have to deal with innovative products. There may be novel technologies like genome editing with several unknowns that we need to fill in gaps in our knowledge. There may be innovative manufacturing approaches like point of care manufacturing. There are cases where we come across borderline products where there is a contribution, where the contribution of each component to clinical benefit risk is not easy to establish. There may be challenges in terms of data requirements because the products may target small patient populations where the comparators may not exist, and also we may have to rely on registries to fill in gaps in the evidence. And overall, the evidence generation at the pre-approval stage and post-marketing stage and for market access can be problematic. And there is a question, how many patients clinical trials are adequate? Oh, well, this really depends on the disease and the patient population. It's not something that we can answer by putting down a number, I'm afraid. If it's a very rare disease, we may need, even 30, 50 patients to provide a marketing authorization, a positive opinion. But if it's a common disease, we may need thousands of patients to approve it. Yeah.
Maybe I can intervene here. I think we have authorized one product for a rare disease where we had 20 patients, and 12 were actually well studied, and that was the totality of the patient, because this represented 50% of the European population affected by that disease. So even if we wanted to ask for more, we would not be able to find these patients. So depending on the frequency of the disease, its prevalence or its incidence, you will have a different response. What we try is to get standardized data from the patient. They need to be followed. We need to know a little bit the natural history of the disease. So even if we take a comparator, which is a historical control, so not in a trial directly comparing, but from what we know from the past, we will need this information to try to understand if the product is modifying the natural history of the disease in a positive way. So the number can go down to a couple of dozens to a thousand. And we said for vaccine for COVID, we actually require more than 3,000 in a trial. So the situation is extremely different depending on the disease. Over.
Yeah, exactly. And in case we have a very rare disease, we may grant what we call exceptional marketing authorization, where we do not expect that it is feasible to provide conclusive data on the outcomes, because there are not patients to treat. There are very few patients. So we may not be able to receive finally a very robust evidence. But if there is evidence based on some patients that have been treated, that this is promising and that the medicine works, then certainly, we lower, the requirements, and we grant a marketing authorization. But certainly the case is very, very different when we talk about common diseases. And here you can see just an overview of the various challenges that we encounter in the life cycle of ATMPs, starting from product consistency, because the starting materials for these products are usually quite different. They depend quite often on the patient or the donor cells or tissues. It's quite challenging to establish a proof of concept. We usually talk about small populations because the diseases they target may be rare. The study designs may not be optimal, and I will talk about this a bit later. Or it's challenging to show sustained efficacy, because this would require a very long period of time after the treatment. Also, there may be problems with retreatment because of immunological reactions to the product. And finally, we may need to rely on real-world data to supplement the evidence submitted at the stage of marketing authorization. I'm sure that you all know that randomized controlled trials are the gold standard for clinical development, and this is because they minimize various bias that may be seen when we don't randomly assign patients to a treatment or to a control group. However, with ATMPs, very frequently, we see that the developers use single-arm trials, which means that there is not a direct comparator group. And this can be accepted, but under specific circumstances. We need to have a strong belief that there is a superiority of the experimental therapy compared to alternatives. Certainly the disease needs to be rare, and in this case it may be unethical or non-feasible to randomize the patients. the disease needs to have a predictable course so that we can understand what is the effect of the product versus to the natural evolution of the disease. The endpoints that they are used, the outcomes in the clinical trials need to be as objective as possible, so as not to have bias there. If, for example, if it's a self-reported outcome by a patient, this may be biased, but if, for example, the outcome is mortality, then this is a very hard endpoint that it's difficult to, not to be objective. The treatment effect needs to be dramatic, to be very significant, so as not to have any doubt that this is caused by the product itself. And also, there should be a less need for a control group. And in these cases, we need additional data sources, both in the pre-authorization and post-marketing phase. In the pre-authorization phase, if we have single-arm trials, we usually need external controls based on disease registries to contextualize the results of the single-arm trials. We need to know from other patients who have not been included in the single-arm trial, how they do after a certain period of time, if they have the same characteristics with the patients that have been treated with the product. But also in the post-licensing phase, we need additional evidence generation for safety and efficacy, and a long-term follow-up for advanced therapies, because we expect that their effects will last for a very long period of time. And of course, we cannot wait for 15 or 20 years before we authorize such a product to make, to be 100% sure that they work. So we should base our marketing authorization on a shorter period of time than the expected efficacy of these products. And also at the stage of marketing authorization, we have some safety data, but these should be complemented by long-term safety data. So we frequently rely on disease registries, and we discuss with developers how they can use disease registries to complement the knowledge, the evidence that exists at the time of the marketing authorization, and fill in gaps both for safety and efficacy of these products. And at EMA, we have a qualification procedure which is also applicable to registries, and we have provided a qualification opinion for some of registries that can be used for regulatory purposes. If there's a question, are those registries on EU level? No, the registries can be at any level, so it's not necessary that they should be only at EU level.
Maybe I can complement that answer, because I think
yes.
People sometimes do not make the difference between a product registry and a disease registry. And we are pushing for disease registry, which means that they will include any type of product or treatment used and not just the one, because otherwise you have a sort of selection bias where you look only at one product and you may not see the reality of following the disease. Just a parenthesis.
No, very good parenthesis. Thank you, Agnes. And there's a question if there are approvals of ATMPs that have been reversed based on long-term data. As far as I know, no, we don't have a change in an opinion for an advanced therapy product. But Agnes, if you are aware of product,
We have
please?
reversed the decision for one conditional marketing authorization, as far as I know, but I don't think it was an ATMPs. We had a discussion about the product used for Duchenne because of the fact that the longer term trials were not very convincing, but we left the product because the benefit risk was still considered positive, although there was a very low margin of efficacy. But I don't think we have reversed the decision for an ATMP. Some products have been withdrawn from the market, but for commercial decision, as you said earlier.
Yes, thank you. So, I will go on to a recent publication by EMA colleagues, which describes some key learnings from the EU experience with ATMP marketing authorization and highlight some hotspots for ATMP approval. And these include problems with product consistency, challenges with starting materials, lack of long-term follow-up, as already highlighted, and a limited clinical data package, especially when we have rare diseases. So I will just summarize the key messages from this second part, and then we can go into the questions. The ATMP development is complex, and this is acknowledged by the EMA in terms of quality, preclinical, clinical development. The study design should be optimized to generate robust evidence for a benefit risk assessment. There are cases where even a small randomized trial is preferred, even if statistical significance cannot be reached, versus a single-arm trial with more patients, because then we can really understand and have a higher certainty whether the effects observed are due to the product. And finally, disease registries are useful data sources to construct external controls in single-arm trials, and also for the long-term follow-up of patients to understand more about the efficacy and safety of these products. Yeah, and the question is about registries. Well, yes, registries, as far as we have seen, can be based on national databases, but in some cases, these national registries collaborate, and they can collect data that can be merged in a larger database with harmonization of data elements that are collected. And we are really very keen into this type of registries, which are quite broad. They cover several countries. And I can just mention briefly that recently we are in discussions with the World Hemophilia Registry that makes an effort, for example, to collaborate with all registries around the globe and collect all the data for also for gene therapies for hemophilia. So yes, the registry owners should aim at harmonization, and the EMA can be involved in discussions in terms of data elements that we would like to see in specific disease. Thank you.
Maybe I can complement also, because
yes,
we had a number of workshops on registries and the need to have a common data models, so we can analyze the data in a more effective and reliable way. What it will depend whether the registry has been a spontaneous one or it has been one imposed by EMA as part of the marketing authorization conditions, where we can ask the company to facilitate the establishment of a registries. Very often these registries are also generated by the learned society in charge of the disease. In particular, in Europe, we have one which is called the European Bone Marrow Transplantation Registry, which is a very good one, is very extensive, and is working with us to try to standardize the data so we can make the regulatory analysis that is necessary. And so by working together, we can improve the registry to make it more usable by us, but at the same time, still usable by the learned society for the purpose of treating the patient. So there are works. It actually touches upon the use of real-world evidence for the purpose of regulatory work, which is in itself a long story, and so I'll stop here.
No. Yes, many thanks for mentioning ABMT. We were indeed in a close collaboration for a long time, and basically the data, the long-term safety and efficacy data for CAR T-cell products are collected through a specific module that EBMT has set up. And this was really a very, very important step in using in real practice a registry to complement the knowledge on a very specific new class of treatments. Yeah. If there are no more questions, I can stop for a few seconds in case someone. Okay, yes, there is one more. Would someone some kind of use of As far as I know, no, the platelet-rich plasma cannot be considered an ATMP. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No, blood products are not considered ATMPs unless there is an industrial process to modify them and to transform them into another type of product, but that would not, otherwise it's not an ATMP.
Exactly. They need, to be considered an ATMP, they need substantial manipulation and to be used for a different purpose. So no, the answer is no. Any other question? If not, I can continue. And certainly, if any questions come up on the previous parts of the presentation, you can still ask them at the end of this session. No. They are not considered biosimilars. There is not the notion of biosimilarity in ATMPs.
And I don't think in the future, they are so difficult to manufacture and so patient dependent that it's unlikely that we will have a biosimilar. Maybe one day, in principle, it's not totally excluded, but it's not what we currently expect to see.
Yes, at least at this stage, it's not something we can define, an ATMP to be defined as a biosimilar. Okay. Yeah. Once patent is, well, in this case, I'm not sure because there is such complexity in the development process that I don't think that it is feasible for another developer to use the same process for an ATMP for another product.
From the IP right perspective, in principle, yes, it is possible when the patent has expired, you should be able, but don't forget that these patents are quite long, and this means that they will have to wait 20 years or 25 years, and it's very likely that by that time, the process will have changed or evolved so much. We're not even sure that the product that we see at the beginning and at the end of a development are identical because innovation is coming in all the time. So I think it's more the question that it will be outdated before the patent expires.
Yes, indeed. Yes, the CAR T cell products are ATMPs, certainly. There is a modification on the T cells, and this is substantial, and these are used to treat several cancer types. Certainly, these are ATMPs, and they are, everything that we said applies to these products.
Okay, I think you can continue, and we'll take more questions later on if necessary.
Yeah. We have plenty of time. I think we will have lots of time in the end to take more questions. So the last part of my presentation is to give you an idea on how EMA supports innovative products. And here you can see a graphic showing several tools that EMA offers to support drug development in general, both in the pre-authorization and post-authorization phase. And also you can see that there are some specific tools for ATMP products like classification and certification. And I'm going to touch and describe some of these tools in the next few slides, starting from the very early tools. So the ATMP classification is a very simple procedure. It lasts 60 days and there is no fee. And this is to provide regulatory certainty to ATMP developers on whether they are developing an ATMP, what is the legislation that they have to consult, and what are the guidelines applicable to their product. And this can take place at early stages of development. There is no expectation that the product is already in non-clinical or clinical development. The ATMP certification is only for SME companies, small, medium enterprise companies, and it provides a scientific certainty on whether the product under development is on track for a future marketing authorization application. The CAT receives a dossier with quality and non-clinical data, and this is assessed in a 90-day procedure. The applicant will finally receive a report, and if the evaluation is positive, they will receive a certificate by the EMA. Now, the Innovation Task Force is a very important forum for early discussions with regulators, and basically it is a preparatory dialogue and orientation on innovative methods and technologies for both sides, both for developers and for regulators. There are several objectives of these meetings. Certainly, the objective is to assist knowledge exchange on innovative products involving the regulatory network. The early dialogue can touch on scientific, legal, or regulatory issues. Through this dialogue, we as regulators also get ready and are made aware of new developments, new innovative approaches, and therefore we make sure that we have the resources to be able to provide support for these innovative products and technologies. Now, the other tool which is really important in our interactions with developers is scientific advice. And this is a regulatory process which is voluntarily and it's open to all applicants. there is a fee reduction for SMEs developing products, and this is 90%. And there is also a fee reduction for ATMP developers who are not SMEs. And also recently, there is a fee waiver for orphan medicinal products developed by SMEs or academia. Now, the working party that provides the scientific advice is the Scientific Advice Working Party, which is a working party of the CHMP and provides the advice in collaboration with other committees and working parties. There is an internal dialogue with other committees like the PRAC, the PDCO, the COMB. And certainly the CAT, when we talk about scientific advice on advanced therapies. The procedure, the scientific advice procedure can last either 40 or 70 days, so it is relatively short. It only lasts 70 days when we decide that we need to talk directly to the developer. And in this case, we may have a face-to-face or nowadays a virtual meeting with the applicant where we discuss certain aspects of the development to gain better understanding of their plans. And following this meeting and the whole procedure, we issue an advice letter to the applicant that they should take into account in further steps of their development. Also, we can provide the possibility for a parallel scientific advice with the FDA or a parallel scientific advice with health technology assessment bodies to shape better the evidence that is also needed to make reimbursement decisions. And here you can see a graph with the scientific advice procedures provided specifically for ATMPs from 2009 to 2019. You can see this increase, especially from 2012 till last year. And especially you can see the increase shown with the red bars, which concerns gene therapy medicinal products. So there is a quite high interest and uptake of the scientific advice procedure for ATMPs. In terms of scientific advice procedure in parallel with health technology assessment bodies, as already mentioned, this is to align the evidence generation and serve both the approval decisions by EMA, but also the reimbursement decisions. And we encourage developers to come for an early dialogue also with HTAs. This is quite important, or to initiate certainly a dialogue with HTAs, even outside a parallel procedure. And so we can provide feedback at an early stage of the development of a product, and this way we hope that the development can be optimized and finally the product will reach the patients. Now, another procedure that I briefly mentioned when talking about registries is the qualification, which can be offered to novel methodologies or biomarkers or registries. And I have a list of some examples on this qualification procedures. They can be used for methods that help in predicting toxicity of medicines, or methods to enrich a patient population for a clinical trial, like biomarkers. Also, they can be relevant to surrogate clinical endpoints that help in instead of using hard clinical endpoints in clinical trials, and therefore reaching an understanding of the efficacy of medicine before we have hard clinical endpoints. Also, sometimes developers may have new patient or caregiver reported outcomes that they would like to validate and be used for to support the development of medicines, and this can be quite important also for HTA bodies. And finally, as mentioned earlier, we can offer qualification for disease registries. There is a question, can expectations from the HTA kill earlier? This is very difficult to answer, and I wouldn't think that it can kill, but certainly to be made aware of the HTA requirements, it would be important, because then the developer can rethink and probably replan the studies and the outcomes that are needed for ATMP approval. We are certainly aware of the challenges, as mentioned, the several challenges that are relevant to these products, but inevitably, after the marketing authorization, the HTAs will need to make an assessment and reimburse. So it's good to be aware of the requirements and try to see what is feasible to be followed, to be implemented in order to also address the requirements of HTAs. I don't know, Agnes, if you would like to comment on this.
Yeah, maybe I can just remind the audience that the objective of the joint scientific advice, when we do this procedure where we have representative from HTA bodies in the scientific advice, is not to kill the product and to tell people that they should not develop. Is to try to merge the necessary element that will be taken into consideration by the various bodies. We retain, each of us, we retain our own criteria. Approval is based on quality, safety, and efficacy, and benefit risk at the end. And HTA is on relative effectiveness. And there is an element of comparison. So it's, for example, introducing a comparator in a trial. It's, for example, adding an endpoint, a secondary endpoint in the trial. It's not a prejudgment on the cost of the product. So there is no intention or no, in practice, killing of the product. But as Anna was saying, it's more that we want them to be aware that their development may not fit the dual purpose or the dual hurdle that we'll have to go through. The first one being showing efficacy and safety, and the second one showing effectiveness. And rather than having a sequential development, they can do a merged development. So I don't think it kills ATMPs. It makes certainly the developer aware that they will have to justify the benefit strongly. You probably heard that Zolgensma is a product which is costed at about 1 or 2 million euros per treatment. But this is not a treatment, this is a cure. So you also have to look at what is produced, because if you cure a child from the disease, then you do not engage into all the costs of care, of rehabilitation, of overall health care that is given to that child for years. So this is why the cost may seem quite outrageous, but at the same time, it represents a reality. So you can see that having such an expensive product shows that if you have the right benefit, you're not excluded, and certainly you should not be killed, but you should really be able to demonstrate the benefit. Over.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. So if there are no more questions here up to now in this third part, okay, thank you. Thanks for the comment. So I will move into the next tool, which is very important. It's quite new. It's been 4 years, I think, that it's been established. It's the PRIME scheme, and this is to address unmet medical needs for products of high health impact and interest. And here you can see the entry points for PRIME eligibility and the required evidence to enter this scheme and get the EMA enhanced support that we will see what it comprises in the next slide. You can see that there are 2 boxes. The bottom left box concerns the evidence required by SMEs and academic developers to enter into the scheme, which is basically a sound pharmacological rationale and convincing scientific concept. We need some preliminary non-clinical data and also tolerability in first-in-man studies. But for other sponsors, like large pharmaceutical companies, the proof of concept needs to be higher. And in that case, we would ask to have data from some exploratory trials to substantiate the potential of the product to address the unmet medical need. So what offers the PRIME scheme for developers that they get access? There is an EMA dedicated contact point for these developers. And also there is an early CHMP rapporteur appointment or CATA rapporteur appointment when we talk about ATMPs. There is also a kickoff meeting where there is multidisciplinary expertise from the EU network and support in initial discussions and understanding by the rapporteurs and the other experts involved in this therapeutic area. There is also an enhanced scientific advice dialogue with the developers of PRIME products. And also there are fee incentives regarding the scientific advice requests and a potential for accelerated assessment when we come to the stage of marketing authorization. And here you can see a graph showing the numbers of ATMPs that have received PRIME status since 2016. And you can see that quite a few products, ATMP products, have been granted PRIME status, and overall it's almost 50% of designated PRIME products that are ATMPs. So 1 in 2 roughly of the products in the PRIME status are ATMPs. And I will close by mentioning that there is another very important way that the EMA uses to support developers of medicines and also advanced therapies. And this is through the various guidelines that guide the way, steer the companies on how to make their development, to plan their development of products at any level, at the quality level, the non-clinical and the clinical level. And you can see here the website, the AMA website, regarding guidelines relevant for advanced therapies, and a list here of, for example, the guidelines which are relevant to gene therapy products. There is another list for cell therapy products and another one for tissue engineered products. And certainly there are also specific guidelines for the therapeutic areas. So this should be looked into combination. It doesn't mean that you look only at an ATMP guideline. You need also to consider the general guidelines that are provided for specific disease. So there is plenty of material, and it's worth going into the EMA website to do some browsing and get familiar with this type of support that is provided by the EMA to developers of innovative treatments. So I will conclude by saying that the EMA encourages early engagement for ATMPs through pipeline meetings, the innovation task force discussions, through the SME office, and also there is support to academic developers. And the PRIME scheme supports early patient access to innovative medicines through enhanced interactions with the EMA. The ATMP certification and classification are specific tools for ATMP development that can be used. And finally, scientific advice can provide early scientific and regulatory discussions for evidence generation, both in the pre and the post-marketing stage. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and we can take more questions. We have plenty of time, and hopefully we will be able to cover this time.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the presentation. I think it was very clear and very good. And as you can see, it attracts also a lot of questions. I think the first one is about what are the main reasons for denying ATMPs the prime status?
Right. Well, basically, if the requirements that I just mentioned are not fulfilled, if there is not a proof of concept for the product, even at a preclinical level, then this can certainly cause, not access to the prime scheme. This is very important, because usually what we see is that in most cases, I think the unmet medical need is established, but quite often we are not convinced that by the preliminary data that are provided, are submitted, and therefore it may be denied.
I know there are other reasons that have been also encountered. One was that the development was too advanced. So there is no possibility to modify the development. And then the prime status is in order to be to intensify the scientific advice, i.e., to make sure the development meets the regulatory requirement. If the development is completed, there is no point in having the prime status. So that's one of the reasons we have also encountered, in addition to what Anna was saying.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, this is another reason. And this is probably more relevant to large pharma companies that where the evidence needs to be stronger. So we expect exploratory trials, results from more advanced trials, and sometimes it's so advanced that we cannot see the benefit of this enhanced dialogue with the EMA. If there are specific regulatory advices, no. Well, yes and no, it's not a black and white answer. The scientific advice is mainly provided on scientific aspects of the development. So we usually answer scientific questions that have to do with quality, preclinical or clinical aspects, but some regulatory questions can be also addressed and discussed through a scientific advice application, especially when we have a preparatory meeting for scientific advice, because any developer who submits an application for scientific advice can also ask for a preparatory meeting with us to discuss aspects of the development and make sure that the questions asked are well formulated, and also that the positions of the applicant are appropriate so as to understand what they plan to do. Because scientific advice is not doesn't mean that we receive empty questions, just questions. We need to also have the position of the developer on the question they need an answer, and based on this position, on their position, then we assess this and we decide whether we agree or we disagree, and then we certainly explain the reasons why we believe a different approach may be more suitable. And so in some cases, we may receive some regulatory questions that we may discuss with our regulatory affairs colleagues in a pre-submission, in a preparatory meeting, and we may address those outside basically of the scientific advice procedure. Well, as far as I know, the CTD is the same, but Agnes, you can confirm this.
Your answer is
Yes.
absolutely correct. There is no specific CTD for CTD or ECTD for ATMPs. It's just the content that might be different because the product is different, but the CTD is beyond the type of product. Don't forget that CTD is also a common tool across the globe, and ATMP is a specificity of Europe, whereas in other regions like Japan and the US, it's called regenerative disease, and it has a slightly different scope.
Yes, thank you. The next question is, what are the most common RMP additional pharmacovigilance activities, disease registries, and additional risk management minimization? Yes, I would say that quite often there is a need for post-authorization safety studies, the PAS or PAS, or efficacy studies, to further substantiate the benefit of the product in the long term. This is seen quite often for ATMPs. Certainly disease registries are often proposed as the data source to complement the knowledge and fill in the gaps in terms of safety and efficacy. I wouldn't be able to comment on specific RMMs, however, it's quite outside the area that I handle. But I could provide an answer later on this, unless if someone else from our side could answer this.
I'm not sure we have online someone who has been dealing with the risk management, risk minimization measures for ATMPs, but we can certainly look back at a few ATMPs and tell you after the meeting what has been maybe more specific or more a characteristic of this type of product. But I think Anna clarified the objective is really long-term safety, because very often they have a permanent effect, and we want to know what is the effect, and also because we have small population, therefore, or limited in numbers, and we want to know more about the confirmed efficacy over time. There was one question about putting off academics, which I think is an interesting one, because indeed, when we put the PRIME project, we started it, there was not a lot of taking up by academics. We had SMEs, we had large companies coming immediately, but academics were not necessarily rushing to get that. I think this is changing, and we see more and more academics coming and understanding the benefit, but very often they need to have support, because manufacturing to the industrial level and being able to export the product across the border of the member state mean that you need support from a larger company. So we see a collaboration that sets up at the last phase of the development for academics. But we certainly, between the innovation task force and this PRIME project, we see more and more academics coming to us.
Yes, indeed. And we're trying to look at scientific advices offered to ATMPs and extract some conclusions, some messages on the key issues that are raised by developers, and whether they could improve the questions asked, and also the timing of the questions asked, because sometimes they come quite late and in their development, and in this case the scientific advice may not be optimal. So we try to look at the learnings from previous scientific advices, and hopefully we will be able to publish some of this data soon and provide further guidance also to academics that certainly are important developers of these products, especially at early stages of development.
Thank you. We are reaching the end of this session. Thank you very much, Anna. Do we have last minute questions? Generally, we have a flurry of 2 or 3 questions at people who have held back on the questions. So it's your last opportunity before we close the session. So please go on and type your question in the chat box, please. If not, I would like to thank Anna for this extensive presentation, which was really useful because it covers many of the aspects of an area which is less well established, let's say, than the small molecules that we know. And it's a very interesting area, and we are very hopeful that innovation is really brought to the patient, because, as I said also earlier, the difference between this product and the traditional treatment is we can hope for cure. And this is really a big change over what we've known for decades. So thank you very much, Anna. Do you have a final statement, final message to our audience?
Yes, as we had the discussion just now on academics, just to encourage ATMP developers and small developers to come to us for discussions through all these ways of interaction. They can come for an ITF meeting if they are at early stages, if they have a disruptive new technology. This is of very high interest to us, and we would like to listen to them and understand, whatever is innovative that may pose challenges at later stages of development. So yes, do come to the EMA and ask for interactions depending on the stage the developers are, and we will do our best to support ATMP development. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you all for participating and asking questions. Thank you very much. We will reconvene at 4 p.m. Amsterdam time for the last session of the day and the last session of this series. And as I said, we will have another more advanced series in the first quarter of 2021. So I'll see you at 4. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Dear colleagues, we restart our session. It's 4 p.m. in Amsterdam, and this is the last session of the day and of this series. The topic in itself is certainly not the last and not the least. We have told you across some of the presentation that patients are at the center of what we do at EMA. This is the primary reason why we're doing our job, and this is certainly the objective, is to get them even more included in our process and procedures. It's my pleasure to introduce Ivana Silva, who works in the Department for Public and Stakeholder Engagement in the Stakeholder and Communication Division. And Ivana is going to present the elements of patient and healthcare professionals' involvement in our activities. And Ivana, just as a clarification, what we do is sometimes we stop in the middle of the presentation, we make some pause, and we take questions as they go, and the question will be in the chat box. Ivana, up to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agnes. It's my pleasure. I hope you can hear me well. And a warm welcome to everyone listening. It's really very interesting to be able to share with you what our experience has been so far, our learnings, and exchange as part of the questions that you may have, or suggestions, comments, to also perhaps learn with you too. So I'm going to start in terms of the why. So why are we doing this? And of course, you have the learning objectives. And we would hope that after the presentation, you will feel that you are more aware and that you understand the importance of involving patients and healthcare professionals in the work of regulatory agencies, and how we engage with patients and how we engage with healthcare professionals. As Anya said, of course, everything we do, we have the patients at heart and present, very present on all our activities. But we do have also other stakeholders that we need to engage. And my focus will be very much on patients and healthcare professionals. And why do we really feel as a regulator, as an agency, that we need to bring their views and their input? It might be very obvious, but still it's very important to go to the basics. And we feel as an agency that it's important to work together and develop very structured and very solid relationship with patients and healthcare professionals, and particularly their representative organizations. And the reasons for this are really to help EMA gain a better understanding of how medicines are being used in real life, to really bring the real life perspective and the potential impact of specific actions that regulators take in patient care. Secondly, to facilitate the incorporation of views and input from patients and healthcare professionals in our activities. And also, last but not least, to raise awareness amongst patients and healthcare professionals of the role and activities that us as regulators and within the network of European medicines agencies have. So the presentation will run through first some general points, and then I would like to go through three main areas, which are depicted in the circles or the lollipops, if you want. In the green one, we are talking about access, how to access the best expertise, and we can then therefore bring real-world experience into the elements of evaluation, but also more areas of interaction with EMA. Then I will go into how we are working towards provide more efficient and targeted communication to both patients and healthcare professionals. And finally, I will share with you what we are doing to really promote and enhance the understanding of these communities and their representative organizations of how the EU Medicines Regulatory Network works and how the regulatory system is there to really promote public health and protect EU citizens' health. So if I start, trying to find here, yes. So since its inception, EMA back in '95, when it was established, we always had in mind that it would be always relevant to bring patients and healthcare professionals in particular into the activities of the agency. And it has to be said that in terms of healthcare professionals, of course, within the network, within the scientific committees, within the colleagues that work within the agency, we are healthcare professionals ourselves. Some of us have had their own clinical practice experience, and they have then developed into a career in regulatory aspects. So we already have very much the healthcare professionals on board. But of course, we can go more extensively and bring more healthcare professionals into these activities. But the missing element was very much the patients. And when we started developing a set of frameworks of interactions where we really define how we are going to bring patients' views into the activities of the agency in a very transparent manner and very solid manner, the first framework of interaction was exactly that for patients. And this was developed in 2005. Then we moved on with the experience gain, and we developed a framework of interaction for healthcare professionals. So as a journey, there are always many opportunities and doors that are opened, but we also face a number of challenges. And of course, it's always something that we need to take into account. Some of the challenges will not go away, but we just need to learn how to handle them and deal with them in the best way. And as far as we are aware that they exist, we can really try to manage as best as we can. And of course, you can imagine we are working in a European context with many different countries and many different languages, and bringing patients and healthcare professionals on board, there's always the issue of language. Of course, we provide information in all the different EU languages, but our working language in committees and in our meetings is English. So we always need to try and find patients and healthcare professionals who are confident enough and feel comfortable enough to speak in English. And as you can imagine, that poses challenges. There's also the resource constraints. All of the patients and healthcare professionals we involve and we engage with, they do so in a voluntary basis. For example, the patients, they have their own lives, of course, they have their jobs, or they have people that they have to care for, and it's not easy to set aside some time for being involved in the activities that we call upon them. And the same goes for healthcare professionals who are clinicians themselves, practitioners. We are talking about doctors, pharmacists, nurses, and so they need to set aside time also to engage in the agency activities. So this is all done on a volunteer basis, so we need to be very aware of that too. Another challenge, which I also will cover in this presentation, it relates to the independence of the expert, and we have specific policies and tools to handle any aspects related with conflicts. I will speak slowly. Thank you. I'm seeing the comment. I'm sorry if I was too fast. I'm very passionate about this topic, so I get a bit too excited.
No, it's okay, Ivana. It's just
it's okay.
the sound is sometimes disappearing a little bit. So when you speak a bit fast, then we don't hear half of the sentence. So just take your time. Thank you. Sorry for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback, because I don't know otherwise. Thank you very much. So one of the challenges we also faced was how to promote the necessary support and training. so that when patients and healthcare professionals come to our activities, they feel more familiarized, if possible, with what is expected from them and how the procedures run. And of course, depending on the activities, depending on what the aspects will be discussed, that support and training has to be varied and has to be adapted. So that was also a challenge, and we've evolved in that sense. Another challenge was really how to adapt to a rapidly evolving landscape of interaction and data collection, and including all the aspects related with digital and real world data. And with the fact that today, for example, we are having this virtual meeting and we are not necessarily having interactions happening physically, face to face in a meeting room. So how do we adapt our interaction also with patients and healthcare professionals in a more remote environment? So it's these two kind of perspectives, not only the fact that healthcare is now more and more looking into digital elements of how to provide care and how to share data, but on the other hand, how the interactions happen and this kind of hybrid between face-to-face and virtual. So how do we bring all of that into developing appropriate and meaningful interaction with patients and healthcare professionals in our activities? Another challenge we've faced throughout this journey was the fact that we may be challenged in terms of the representativeness of a limited number of patients. You will see that in many of our interactions, we might have one or two patients coming. And how is that representative? And we are moving forward in terms of bringing more people and engaging with larger numbers of patients depending on the activity. So that's something that we have also learned throughout the process, acknowledged, is well understood, but also the fact that patients who come, depending on the activities, they come representing their community. So there's an interesting element there, and we might have some discussion around that. And finally, also for healthcare professionals, if they are taking their time, they are volunteering their time, they would like to see that recognized as part of their programs for continuous professional development. So that's another area that we have to look and it's an area that we need to progress. So those are the challenges, but nevertheless, we have indeed taken a good journey.
Ivana, I think maybe you can move the microphone slightly closer to your mouth, so because at some point the sound is too low and we cannot hear you. Sorry again for interrupting.
No problem. Apologies. I hope it's better now. And I hope you've heard what I've said.
I think we did, but it's better? Easier.
Okay, good. As I said, we faced all those challenges, but the truth is we've been able to involve in many occasions many different patients and healthcare professionals. And in this slide, I wanted to show you the ways we involve, and it's important. So on your left side, you will see that we have patients and healthcare professionals that would be representing their community, so as a whole. And this happens, for example, for those who are sitting in the EMA Management Board and also in the EMA Scientific Committees. So we have, you will see, for some committees, it's already in the legislation. It is foreseen that patients and healthcare professionals will be members of those committees, and there they are representing the entirety of the community, patient community and healthcare professional community. Then there is the level of representing their organizations, and this happens, for example, as part of the working parties that I mentioned in the beginning, so the Patient and Consumer Working Party, and that's the acronym PCWP, and also for the Healthcare Professionals Working Party, HCPWP, where we have representatives of European organizations bringing the views on behalf of those organizations. This can also happen in some consultations where they bring the views of the organizations, and in participating in workshops, either as speakers or as participants, where they can contribute to the discussions on behalf of their organizations. And finally, the most relevant to the elements in terms of evaluation. So product-specific activities where we really involve patients and healthcare professionals in evaluations, that they will do so in their individual capacity as individual experts. And in that case, they will have to comply, of course, with our policy on the handling of competing interests as any expert. And you will see on the right side the evolution in terms of amount and volume of activities we have engaged with patients and with healthcare professionals throughout the years. The bars are in two different colors, and this will be also seen as I move along the presentation. The lighter colors are reflect the volume of interactions that are product specific. So this means in procedures which are subject to confidentiality, and the darker part represents all other activities where we engage with patients and healthcare professionals. And you will see that this will be a bit different, for example, for healthcare professionals, where the lighter bars is a little bit smaller, because, as I said, the network already has in itself a number of healthcare professionals. So we go to the organizations in occasions where we need additional expertise or where we need to have more people involved. And then the volume of the darker part of the bars reflect the many other activities that they are involved. So how do we, what
question? We have a question in the chat box for you. Who does appoint patients for EMA Management Board or the committees?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. This is gone through a call by the European Commission, and then it has to be discussed, and also the European Parliament is involved in the discussion of the short lists of the candidates. So there's an open call, there's a public call which is launched by the Commission. Anyone can put forward their nominations. They have to be, there's specific rules for those calls. And then the European Parliament has a say on the people who are shortlisted. And then it's for the Commission, the final decision, and this is published as well. So I think that clarifies the point. Thank you very much. I see no further questions, so I will continue. In terms of how the different methodologies that we use to engage with patients and healthcare professionals, we had to develop throughout the years a number of methodologies, because the point is that one size will not fit all the different types of activities that we have, and we had to develop situations where we would engage face-to-face, either, of course, with meetings or via teleconferences. We have situations where we have the possibility to have surveys or having written consultations where we will have a set of questions that we have agreed, for example, with scientific committees, and where it has been felt important to bring the views of patients and healthcare professionals. And so we can go back to either individual experts or organizations to provide their input. We have, as I said, committee meetings where we either have members of the committees, or we can invite additional patients and healthcare professionals to join particular very specific discussions. And there are other situations where in order to bring additional perspectives and additional views, there are specific methodologies around developing additional information on patient preferences. And this is a whole area that is developing very much, and which my colleague Natalie Baer, who also works in the department, is very much leading at the agency. And a lot is being done, particularly now in the field of oncology. Then we had, on the other side, we had, as I said, to develop also training and support. And these can happen we have an annual training day where we invite new patients and healthcare professionals who have not yet been familiarized or have not yet had an opportunity to participate in EMA activities. And we provide an opportunity to explain how the work of the agency and how specifically their involvement would happen. We also develop info sheets. We have some videos. We call them some EMA basics that we have on the web pages that we have dedicated for patients and for healthcare professionals. As I said, web pages, and we also have one-to-one personalized support. We have calls where we are open to explain on a more personal perspective whatever is needed for that patient or for that healthcare professional to really feel comfortable to provide their input in the activities of the agency. So with this, I want to now really focus, and if you remember in the first slide, I mentioned that there is a whole area around how do we access best possible expertise and bring the real world experience into the evaluation activities of the agency. So the next couple of slides is going to focus on that. And then maybe we can stop and have some questions, and then we will follow with the other two elements of targeted information and how do we raise awareness about our activities. So in terms of what you see in this slide is really the life cycle of the medicine from the moment we receive a pre-submission phase where we have a company or an academic group that may come to us with some particular questions around the development, the design of their clinical studies. And at that level, we provide scientific advice. And we have a large volume of involvement at this moment of patients in that process. We also have other situations when there is an orphan designation and classification, or for example, as part of the pediatric investigation plans, where through the specific committees and where we have committee members representing patients and healthcare professionals, their involvement is happening as well. In the evaluation phase, once we have received an application, there's also a number of situations where that involvement can happen, not only as committee members, we have the different committees, although, for example, for the Committee for Human Medicinal Products, because it was the very first, and at that time the legislation did not foresee specific members of patients and healthcare professionals to be part of the membership of the committee. We don't have specific members there, but we have other ways to bring the views. And in particular, there are situations related with the scientific advisory group meetings where the CHMP, in this case, would ask a group of experts to go through a more specific set of questions where they would like to have some advice, and which would then will be taken in consideration by the committee. We have also in the post-authorization phase, of course, there is the continuous monitoring, and there will be situations where the medicines will come back for re-evaluation and reassessment. And again, through the committees and through specific expert meetings and written consultations, the input is also brought into perspective. And we have a number of documents that are produced by the agency throughout these different moments of the life cycle, which are reviewed also prior to publication by patients and healthcare professionals, so that we make sure that the messages are sufficiently clear and meaningful for them. So that's what is depicted in this scheme, where you see the public summary of opinion, and you see, for example, product information, and we have patients providing input in the review of package leaflets, for example. And we have healthcare professionals providing their views, their input on direct to healthcare professional communications.
Maybe Ivana can put a comment or question here. Do we write specifically for patient, or do we use the same language for all our audience?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we do have lay language that is used for the medicines overview. for example, which is so we have the EPARs, which are the public summaries of what is actually published by EMA. But there is a brief summary with some specific questions, which has been developed. The structure has been developed together with patients, and the content for each new medicine, where a medicine overview is produced, is reviewed by patients, and there is a specific language used for that. So it is not avoiding technical terms as much as possible and explaining as much as possible some of the aspects that may not necessarily be so easy to go away from the technical terms. But yes, there is a specific language used. There is all that process that has been developed throughout the years. It was not like that in the very early stages, but listening to the needs and to the concerns expressed by patients through the Patient and Consumer Working Party, that language has been progressed and developed. Here in this next slide, I wanted to share with you some of the aspects I've already mentioned. There are several opportunities to bring input in evaluation activities. And as you've heard already, they can do so as committee members. And here, when they go through the process, I explained that through the calls from the Commission and approval by the Parliament and so on, once they are sitting in a committee, the patients and healthcare professionals that have been appointed by that means, they are members as any other one. So they have voting rights and they contribute in the same manner. However, as I said, there are resource constraints, and in that sense, some of the patients and some of the healthcare professionals do not have the same amount of support that, for example, colleagues who are there sitting and providing their input are working for the regulatory agencies, and they have the support of assessors within the regulatory agencies. That does not happen for the patients and the healthcare professionals that join the committees, and that's where our Department of Public and Stakeholder Engagement provides as much support as possible, as well as the secretariats of each scientific committee. There are other opportunities in terms of scientific advice procedures, scientific advisory groups, and ad hoc expert group meetings. So these are the type of things that happen either in pre-submission phase or then after in the evaluation phase. We also have opportunity that has recently developed from the implementation of the pharmacovigilance legislation, which are the public hearings. And these public hearings, the very first one took place in 2017. So this is a new area and a new tool to involve patients and healthcare professionals and to listen to the public in general as well on issues related with a specific safety assessment that is being done, which is of public interest, and where the Committee for Pharmacovigilance and Risk Assessment has considered, following a number of criteria, that it is important to hold a public hearing and to hear what patients and healthcare professionals would like to input into the concerns that have been raised. There are also a number of workshops and public consultations, and also as part of the development of regulatory guidance, which are also put for public consultation. All of these are situations where we can bring the input of patients and healthcare professionals. And there's also participation in EMA workshops, which then, as I said, lead to the guidance development, which is then used by medicine developers, either companies or academic groups. So there's a whole set of activities. And in here, I've put a brochure that has been developed recently, which is called From Lab to Patient. And you can find it either as a PDF booklet, or you can find it in an interactive manner in the EMA website. And I've put the link once the slides will be shared, where you can, again, in a language which is a little more accessible, one would say, not so regulatory jargon. It's a nice way to really have an overview of how the activities of the regulator bring then the patients and the healthcare professionals on board. So I would invite you to have a read and use it as a resource to perhaps further explain how the European system works and how we bring the perspectives of different stakeholders on board. I see we have a question as well, and actually I wanted to stop here before going to further elements, and maybe I take the question in terms of translations. So indeed, the translations are done at the level of the agency for translations. So we first publish in English, but then all for example, the medicines overviews are also translated, and you will find them in different languages. So I hope that responds to the question. If I continue, I wanted to show you one particular area which is very relevant, particularly for the patient involvement, and that is the scientific advice procedure. And why is that so important? Because here we're really talking at the very early stages of the development of clinical design and bringing patients on board. So this is something that the companies have to come forward voluntarily if they want to have such a scientific advice. And then we involve patients in that process. And this is extraordinarily important because this is the time where aspects are being discussed are, for example, endpoints and what will be perhaps seen as important from the side of the developer may not necessarily be the same for patients. And therefore, it's very important to have them on board. And what we've seen is that out of that input, the experience has seen that patients provide input in aspects related with the populations that are proposed to be part of the studies, with the study feasibility in itself, for example, how many times they are asking the patient, for example, to come to the hospital and so on, specific endpoints, what is the comparator choices, aspects related with quality of life, the standard of care, and other aspects. So you can see that not only the numbers in terms of how many patients we have been able to involve throughout the years, but also the diversity of the input that is taken into account is quite relevant, and it's very well received by everyone involved.
Maybe, Ivana, I can say here that what is also striking and surprises sometimes people is that actually patients make the working party change its views on the development, and it actually changes the outcome. So it's not just that they provide a view, it is actually changing the views, the final view. I think this is quite striking.
Indeed. And to get to that point, of course, we had to use the experience of many years, but that's the reality. And also, it's also striking to say that in some cases, by involving patients and healthcare professionals, but particularly by involving patients in the procedures, they also see that in occasions, the arguments put forward and the evidence that is explained, they also understand that then perhaps the final opinion that the committee is taken is very much, they can understand it very much. For example, in a situation where we may be discussing a new therapy for a very complex disease, but there is not enough evidence for giving a positive opinion, through the discussion and through the exchanges in the committee with the involvement of patients, they also come to agree that as much as they would like to have a new therapy, there is not enough to go ahead with an approval. So it's both directions here, and I think it's a learning curve for both sides, regulators and also patients and healthcare professionals.
Thank you, Ivana. You have two more questions. One is,
yes,
can patients from non-EU countries take part in public hearings?
Well, Normally, it is for EU citizens. They are, however, broadcast. So there is a situation where everyone who is interested can listen to the public hearing. It is indeed for EU citizens to contribute. We may have situations where a representative of an organization may not necessarily be that person may not be from an EU country, but it is representing an European organization which has been given an eligibility status by the agency, and I will explain this further down. But to be concrete, the way for that, it's not really an involvement, it's more the fact that it is open and transparent, and anyone can listen to the public hearing. So I think that responds.
It's the representativeness which is in question for the EU, but we don't check the nationality on the passport. Okay, and the next question is the engagement of healthcare professional and patient in EMA committees, is it on a voluntary basis? You have explained the appointment, but how do we get more people into the system?
Okay, so there are a couple of things that needs to be reflected here. So first of all, yes, they participate on a voluntary basis in terms of there's no remuneration. However, we have a system where we provide some support for their traveling and accommodation, and there is a daily allowance that is provided for the patients and healthcare professionals, so for the members who are sitting in the committees. Then there are situations where we need to bring the input of more patients and more healthcare professionals beyond those who are already sitting in the committees. And this is where we have all these methodologies that I have explained, that we have, for example, written consultations, or we can have additional expert meetings where we have more people involved. But again, it's on a voluntary basis, and if there is a physical mobilization that people have to come to the agency, there will be a daily allowance that is provided. But other than that, is on a voluntary basis.
But there is a process of appointment for expert, which is different from patient organization.
Yes, I will discuss that further down in the presentation, if that's okay.
Okay.
So, because I think the slides may help also to understand. So if I continue, so this is an area where I've mentioned in terms of involvement in benefit risk at EMA. I've brought here two committees, the Committee for Human Medicinal Products, CHMP, and the Pharmacovigilance and Risk Assessment Committee, PRAC. And here, the specific areas I've already mentioned. For both patients and healthcare professionals, we have at CHMP level the scientific advisory groups and written consultations. And then we have, for patients specifically, oral explanations at plenary meetings at CHMP. There are studies that are being performed to assess the patient preference. So in terms of different elements of risk, patients may be more averse or not so averse to certain risks, and those preferences are tested and collected through specific methodologies. And there's an ongoing pilot that we will start very soon to really bring early interactions with the patient community. So by looking at the different products that are going to be assessed, and as you know, EMA publishes all the agendas. So by assessing which products are going to be coming in terms of initial evaluations, this is already an early stage where the interaction with the patient community can happen. So this is something that is a new direction we're taking to bring more patients into the discussions of the committee. And again, there is a specific process to have experts appointed, and I will cover that. For the PRAC, we have again different aspects, and I've already mentioned not only that they are members, but also written consultations. We can also hold ad hoc expert groups when there are specific questions that need to be further discussed. We can have multi-stakeholder meetings, and here is a type of meeting where we have representatives of organizations sitting around the table with committee members. And here we could have, for example, a situation where we may need to hear from organizations representing diabetologists, for example, but also patients, but also pharmacists and nurses, and they will all sit around the same table and discuss specific questions the PRAC may have under a specific procedure. And then we have the public hearings that I mentioned. So I see a question. Maybe I take this, Agnes, that says, could you please share with us the terms you are asking for healthcare professionals and patients for their engagement?
Yeah, what do you ask when you we want to engage a group or an individual?
Okay, is it for individuals is the same as any expert. So they have to go through a process where they have to provide to fill in a declaration of interest and confidentiality agreement. They have to submit a CV, and this is done all electronically via the EMA, their specific expert database. So they will be provided with forms that have to be filled in. The declarations of interest they have to be validated, and we have to assess what are the conflicts, if any, the interests that have been declared, and depending on the activities, that may lead to a restriction or even a no participation. So this is something that is done for any expert, regardless of whether it's a patient or a healthcare professional. And it happens in the same way as for committee members. It's the same treatment. For patients, we have a process where the aspects that are requested are also facilitated in terms of submission of CV, where they say they are patient, and that makes things a little bit quicker and easier. But other than that, the process is exactly the same. So I hope that explains.
And for an organization, we look at the conflict of interest, but I think you're explaining that also.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I will. So I wanted here to share specific examples in the area of safety, and I mentioned the public hearings. We've had two public hearings. The first one in 2017, where we were discussing safety aspects related with valproate, and very specifically the fact that some of the risk minimization measures were not really being followed, and there was a need to revisit what was needed to further ensure that the measures that were needed to ensure that when taking valproate there will not be harms for the child in case of an unexpected pregnancy for women who are taking valproate. And it was a very important discussion that took place. And it was possible through that involvement and through the overall involvement through other ways and discussions within the PRAC to really revisit the risk minimization measures and to incorporate new measures that really took into account the aspects that were brought forward by patients and by healthcare professionals. And we had another one in 2018 looking more into specific antibiotics. And again, these are very difficult discussions in the sense that, particularly for the quinolones and fluoroquinolones, we were talking about long-lasting, life-changing severe effects. And through the PRAC and through the referral that took place, it was possible to create further awareness and recognition of those side effects. And we had involvement from different patient organizations, but also healthcare professionals. And particularly in this one, we had the general practitioners also involved, so that we reach out more to the primary care level. And then we have what we call stakeholder meetings or multi-stakeholder meetings where we bring around the same problem different perspectives. And this we have had recent cases around valproate and retinoids and methotrexate, where the safety issues really were looking into how to improve the education materials and additional measures that would need to be effective for patients and in particular also healthcare professionals to take into account in their practice while prescribing and while dispensing and handling medicines. And it is very interesting to see people who have different backgrounds and are working in different clinical settings to discuss the same issues. So here it's really people brought together to discuss a particular procedure and a particular safety aspect. So let me explain now. I think this was the big question in terms of how do we comply with the different elements to ensure not only representativeness, but reliability and independence of experts and also of the organizations. So in terms of the organizations' representatives, these organizations undergo what we call an eligibility criteria assessment. And this is part of the frameworks of interaction that I mentioned in the very beginning of the presentation. And there is a set of criteria that have been developed and endorsed by the management board of EMA, where we explain different elements of legitimacy, what we would consider to be a representativeness and legitimacy. So, for example, the organization has to be an European organization, which is a non-profit organization, which truly represents patients in the case of a patient organization, or healthcare professionals in the other case. That their activities, their mission, and that their legal entity is registered within an EU member state, or if not, they have concrete membership of more than 50% of EU member states. And they have a specific structure, that they have transparent and accountable around their funding sources. And in terms of the funding sources, what we really, there's a very specific set of criteria. First of all, if they have, as part of their fundings, industry funding, there are percentages that apply, and they have to be fully transparent about those. So if organizations are funded by more than 20% by industry, they have to have at least 3 different, they have to diversify those sources. They have to be at least from 3 different sources. And all of that has to be transparently and clearly stated on their websites. And every year, every organization that has been granted an eligibility status is reassessed. So this is in terms of the organizations, and all of the organizations who may want to work with the agency or are interested in the agency activities, they are registered in our internal stakeholder database. But only those who have undergone this process of criteria assessment are then listed on the EMA web pages. So those are the ones who we publicly recognize as having gone through this process and which closely work with us, and which will be our first port of call for engaging in our activities and also for reaching out when we need for individual experts. We go to these organizations with our requests and say we have an upcoming activity where we would need someone who has experience of living with this particular condition, or is caring for someone with that condition, or a healthcare professional who is specialized in a particular field. So this is how it works for organizations. For individual experts, as I said, they have to declare their interests as any other expert and have to take confidentiality undertaken, and they are then inserted in the expert database. And this is information which is publicly available on our website. So all the experts who are registered in the expert database and who have been participating in specific procedures, we don't say which procedures, but all of those, they are they are available on the website. So I think that explains, hopefully, Agnes. Let me know if I need to go even further more in detail.
Well, I'm very happy with what you presented, but it's more for the audience to tell us if they have additional question. But I think you send very well the message that patients and healthcare professionals are the main audience and stakeholder for us. Yes, we work with industry because they submit application, but the real output of what we do is intended for these two categories of stakeholders. And we are trying to put them at the core and the center of what we do to make sure that they are well represented, their views are taken into consideration, and also they can understand what we are doing and participate as much as possible. So please, if you have questions or special interest on patient participation, you can also share your own experience of having patient in your own authority and share it in the chat box if you want. And thank you very much, Ivana. It was very clear. I think the sound is much better.
I still have some slides. Maybe I wasn't clear because this is the part. Sorry. No, because this I wanted to stop here in case
yes.
Participants may have some questions, and then I have a couple more slides. If still okay.
Yeah, that's okay. We have the time, but I just thought you were finishing, and I was sorry. Please go on.
Sorry.
Go on. And please,
so you see,
please, dear colleagues, put your question in the chat box in the meantime. Thank you.
Okay, so so this was the more specific areas around how we bring patients and healthcare professionals in the evaluation procedures. And so, as I mentioned, where requirements of confidentiality would have to be taken into account. But I also wanted to take the opportunity to share with you other areas where we focus very much around the efficient and targeted communication with these communities, with these stakeholders. And as I mentioned, through these eligible organizations, these organizations that have undergone voluntarily this process of assessing their representativeness and how transparent they are, we have through the years developed a large network of organizations. And we have from the patient and consumer organization side more than around 36 organizations, and for the patients and for the healthcare professionals and learned societies we have 34. So you can see it's quite a large number if we consider that they are most of them umbrella organizations that bring their national organizations, patients and healthcare professionals on board, or specific organizations who represent a particular discipline. For example, let me give you an example: the European Society of Cardiology, or from the side of the patients and consumers, we have, for example, the European Patients Forum or the European Public Health Alliance. So there are quite large organizations who bring a very large community on board. And by having developed these networks, we have in one way an amplifier of the, for example, safety communications that need to reach out more and more patients and healthcare professionals, in addition to what the national competent authorities already do. So it's really an amplification, and having these networks on board really provides additional channels for reaching out to those who really should be taking into account the outcomes of the activities of the committees and what comes out from the agencies. So and also we have developed here, we have an individual expert database, and this is for patients who are not necessarily affiliated to an organization, but who would still want to register with the agency to be kept informed of its activities, and who we could reach out if needed, for example, in very specific situations, and they could be involved again, following all the confidentiality aspects if it is a confidentiality, a confidential procedure. And I see we have a question. I'm not sure what NRI stands for, Agnes. Apologies for my ignorance.
National Regulatory Authority, which means, is this the same in the member state? Are they doing sort of similar approach to patient and healthcare professionals?
So we don't have all the information. We know that a number of national competent authorities do have developed their own methodologies and their own way to bring patient and healthcare professionals on board. We do hear several times through the patient and consumer working party a plea for national competent authorities to really look into the ways that the European Medicines Agency has developed to bring patients on board, and we have had very interesting exchanges with some national competent authorities to exchange our experience. And we've had also some competent authorities coming to the PCWP, the Patient and Consumers Working Party, and the Healthcare Professionals Working Party meetings, also to see the dynamics and to see how things work. And we have had opportunities for them to also, when appropriate and when they find it and needed, to share how they are developing their own methodologies. So we do not have a compilation of what's happening in all different national competent authorities, but we do know that there's a number that is more and more looking into how to bring the perspectives in their own activities. Of course, the communication element and the information element has always been there, but it's more in terms of participation in specific assessments and meetings and so on. But there's been definitely a progression there.
I think there are two elements I would like to maybe also bring to the discussion. One is the national competent authority, as we call them in Europe, the national agencies, are used to communicate with their health professional because they send dear doctor letters. They have contact with professional organization, learned societies, and so on. So that may be relatively well established in most member states. Maybe it's less so with patients because it was not traditionally something people were doing. I still remember the first reaction when we started inviting patients into an area I know very well, the pediatric committee. We still had healthcare professional telling us, but patients won't understand. Why do you invite them? And actually, once they had met with the patient, they realized that they could learn a lot from them. And the second point is, do you see cultural differences across member states on the approach to talking to patient or incorporating patient views?
Well, we hear that from the organizations, so that there are different approaches, but because also there are different healthcare systems. So yes, I cannot say that would be it's everywhere in the same way. There has to be an adaptation to the specific national context, but we hear that from the patient organizations that in some cases things that would apply, or even how we explain certain information, that has to be adapted to the specific national context. So yes. But I also wanted to
maybe can share an example as well, that once we had the first product for Alzheimer's disease, we had to put we had to prepare a patient leaflet. It was quite a long time ago, but it showed very much the north-south approach to the diagnosis. Let's say the Scandinavian countries were used to talk and to speak about the real diagnosis to their patients, whereas the south of Europe was less experienced in that. And there was a discussion, should we put in the patient leaflet the word Alzheimer, yes or no, and dementia? And there was quite an interesting discussion because at the end, we decided to put it in. We also got some feedback from health professionals say, but you're putting a diagnosis in that document, and I had never told my patient that they had Alzheimer's disease. So it's quite interesting to see the progression in transparency and maybe in a more truthful dialogue between the patient and healthcare professional. Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only echo what you said, Agnes, because the fact that we have opportunities through for example, not only to have procedures where we will have the views from patients and healthcare professionals of very specific evaluations of products. What we've also seen through our platforms for dialogue, the patients and the healthcare professionals working parties, is that bringing these different stakeholders on board has helped very much to tackle some aspects that perhaps there were no platforms doing that, and we've seen mutual learning also in the way that the language used, the aspects that the doctor may not have all the answers, and the patient may not also have all the things. So this exchange with the different organizations has helped very much to progress. And what we've seen also over the years is that the healthcare professional organizations have also brought on board different groups. So, for example, nurses, pharmacists within a specific area of medicine, but also the representative patients to their own discussions. So that's, in a way, I cannot say that it was thanks to EMA, but we have developed an area where organizations have felt comfortable to move forward and to discuss further around common problems, common concerns, and find common solutions. So I think that's an additional benefit of overall developing interactions with patients and healthcare professionals. So also what I wanted to say is not just national competent authorities, but also we have very interesting and very nice exchanges with other regulators from other regions, also around how we are engaging with patients and with healthcare professionals. And we've established good contacts with the USA, FDA USA, and also with the Japanese and regulatory agency, and with Health Canada. So we are developing also this and exchanging practices and learning with each other on the possible ways to best interact with patients and healthcare professionals. So it's a national level, but then also pan-European and with other regions of the world.
We have a new question. Are there exchanges also with HTA bodies and ministries of trade?
In terms of patient and healthcare professional engagement, we've had opportunities to bring HTA stakeholders into some of the workshops and some of the discussions. But this is specifically in terms of patient and healthcare professional engagement. We have, for example, UNETA, which is an European network for health technology assessment bodies, which has been put together through joint action of the Commission. So there's funding for that. And they have had a specific work stream around engaging with patients and healthcare professionals. And we have exchanged a number of learnings that we have had with our own way of working with patients and healthcare professionals, and in particular, how to handle conflicts of interest, for example, and how to bring the views into specific evaluations. So we have had those exchanges with ministries of trade. I cannot comment because we haven't had that experience. I have not been involved, and as an agency, I don't think we have.
No, we don't engage with ministries of trade. This is not our objective. We are more closer to ministries of health because our main concern is public health.
Yeah. I also see a question around patient leaflets. This is absolutely a point that has been taken for many years, and there's been progress made in several areas through the fact that patients have raised so many concerns on the structure and the current difficulty to extract information from the patient leaflet. there is, of course, a legal structure that has to be, that is established in the legislation, but there's more that can be done. And for example, having additional information as part of the medicines overview is a way as well in terms of question and answer. It's something that provides additional information on the medicine, how it has been evaluated, what has been taken into account, in an easy way for patients to read. But also there's been a long effort to also be able to provide the patient leaflet information in a more user-friendly and also in an electronic format, which will help to provide and extract information in a different way. So as we hear the concerns and the problems that are faced by patients with the use of patient leaflet, we have taken on board as much as we can. But again, certain changes can only happen through changes in legislation. But we are doing as much as we can on the basis of what the concerns are. And we provide additional information, more general, about how the medicines are evaluated. And also because of the review that I mentioned, where we have patients reviewing the package leaflet, that has in many ways developed the clarity of the information that is in the package leaflet. But again, the structure and the content of the package leaflet has not yet changed, because that would have to change with the legislation.
Thank you.
So, and there's another question. There's sometimes arise issue from patient side regarding access of new medicines in light of patents or data market exclusivity. Yes, well, I have to say that the accessibility area is a very it's a very important one. Of course, there's no point in having medicines which do not reach the patient, but it is a very complex area in terms of what is the remit of the agency and what we can do in terms of our interactions with patients and healthcare professionals. And that's why bringing also the health technology assessment bodies and payers in multi-stakeholder workshops and multi-stakeholder meetings is so important. And we have a whole task force that has been set up between EMA and the heads of medicines agencies around availability of authorized medicines, looking also to aspects related with shortages, but beyond shortages. And we have exchanges on those topics with patients and healthcare professionals, where the HTA bodies and payers are also engaged. So of course, this is an area that is a constant discussion, and progress still needs to continue to be done. And we are in the process of publishing the European Medicines Agencies Network to 2025, and the area of availability and accessibility is obviously one of the themes, and where we have specific goals for the next 5 years. And of course, this will have to be continued to be discussed with patients and healthcare professionals.
Yeah, although we do not we work with health technology assessment, which are looking at the relative effectiveness of added therapeutic value. We work with payers a little more, but we are not involved in the pricing. And when we talk about patents and data exclusivity, this is actually limiting the presence of generics and the effect on price that we know generics have, biosimilars or generics actually. So in this aspect, we're not involved. What we can do is only we can respect the law, which says that you have to respect patent law and the protection that a new medicine has, which of course has sometimes a detrimental effect on patients, because they cannot either afford or have access, or because some member states are smaller than others, the company has not marketed the product in their member states because it's not profitable. So it's a complex issue on which the EMA unfortunately has limited effect, but we are trying to make this aspect also visible sometimes and to help in this way. Back to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to go more now because we don't have so much more time, but I think the questions are really interesting, and I think that's the point of having this exchange. I just wanted to highlight here the fact that in terms of the healthcare professional collaboration, one of the recent areas that we've put more effort was really to also bring the general practitioners, the family doctors on board, because much of the attention in the previous years had gone through very specialized disciplines, so the doctors working very much in hospital settings, but also it was felt important, especially when we see a move of healthcare systems and regulators looking into real world data, that we do bring those who are very much in the forefront of collecting that data, that they are part of our interactions. So we've established a very good collaboration with the three organizations that at European level are bringing the perspectives of general practitioners, and we were very pleased to bring that to live last year, and we have now very good interactions with also the representative organizations of family doctors. And I wanted to point out here, in terms of targeted information, that we've developed throughout the years specific web pages on our website, which the entry can be done immediately through. You can see it's either for patients and consumers or for healthcare professionals. We also have for academia and industry and so on. But this has content that is specifically developed and to raise awareness of areas that would be of interest to patients and to healthcare professionals. And we have developed what we call a Human Medicines Highlights, which is a monthly newsletter where we compile information about all the medicines that have been authorized in the past month, but also information about any safety communications, about any withdrawals from the market, information about medication errors, which have been assessed at European level by the committees, and all its information that it's made publicly available on the website, but it is compiled here in a more easily accessible way in this newsletter, which anyone can actually subscribe to. And it was originally tailored for patients, but it has developed an interest through many different stakeholders, and many different people are really interested in this newsletter. And just a final couple of slides just to share with you these platforms that I've been mentioning, which are the Patient and Consumers Working Party and the Healthcare Professional Working Party. So these platforms have been established in different years for patients and for healthcare professionals, but the point of their creation has been to bring under the same platform not only the European organizations that have undergone that eligibility assessment that I explained already, but also the representatives from each scientific committee, human scientific committee of EMA, with also other observers, including, for example, the EMA Management Board and the Commission. And this is a very important platform, both for the patient and consumer side and for the healthcare professional, to bring more discussions that are not product specific, so they are not specific around a particular medicine, but other areas that, for example, would relate with how we work with the different organizations. And all these methodologies that I've shared with you, they have been developed in collaboration with these working parties, but also, for example, strategic discussions around new policies that are coming up for the agency. For example, there was all the discussions around the publication of clinical data, aspects related with policies around shortages. All of that is brought to these platforms for discussion and for identification of specific areas of concern, or also for ideas and suggestions that come from these organizations. So these are very interesting platforms that we've built upon, and that we see a lot of interest from the organizations that are members to really use them as an area for discussion of more high-level topics. And we developed specific work plans, and this is again published on our website if you have an interest. They are joint work plans, and they will have specific areas that are of joint interest for patients and for healthcare professionals, but then there are specific areas of work for each of them. And I wanted also just to share with you some reports that we have published, which may be of interest in which have emerged from discussions or at these working parties. So they've in a way hosted specific discussions, for example, around antimicrobial resistance, personalized medicine. We had a recent one on benefits and risks of use of medicines through pregnancy and breastfeeding, and we've also developed specific methodologies for involving young people in the activities of the commission of the agency, and in particular in the pediatrics committee. So all of these have somehow either the ideas were initially suggested through the working parties, or through discussions and through updates that the EMA colleagues have made at these working parties, there has arisen the idea of perhaps having an information session or develop a multi-stakeholder workshop or so on. So these working parties are really interesting platforms to bring new areas where we need to work more or develop additional methodologies for interaction. And another example would be more strategic documents, such as the European Regulatory Science to 2025 and the currently under development European Medicines Agency Network for 2025. So again, these strategies and the themes have been discussed with these working parties, with these platforms, and input has been collected as well from them. And I think I will just summarize here, and these are my two last slides, in terms of the importance of bringing patients. So what we feel is that having patients on board really brings everyday aspects of living with a condition into the scientific discussions. It helps bridge the gap between clinical trial data and real-world data, and increases transparency, awareness, and understanding of the regulatory system. As we look ahead in terms of areas to continue progressing our interaction with patients, we are looking into adapting to new ways of data collection, including digital and real-world data, to broaden patient data collection through focus groups, through patient preferences studies, to enrich training and support with new tools and content, to also provide guidance and encourage sponsors to collect patient data, and to ensure a strengthened regulatory system that can efficiently integrate patient evidence into its assessment. So it's not just about collecting the data, but then integrating it. So these are the key messages for patients. And if I may conclude with key messages for healthcare professionals, again, this is relevant to bring different healthcare professional groups, such as doctors, pharmacists, and nurses, and look into the clinical practice and real-world experience of the full spectrum of healthcare, so from all the way from primary to tertiary care, and bring these perspectives into drug development and the benefit-risk evaluation and monitoring, and in the same way, increase transparency, awareness, and understanding. And looking ahead, what we are putting our energy on is really to engage with healthcare professionals in the interface of clinical research and clinical practice, so to really look at aspects of clinical trial design, personalized medicine, and use of real-world evidence. And on the other hand, to contribute to a more efficient and targeted communication so that the risk minimization measures that are agreed can really reach into the clinical guidelines and change certain clinical behaviors and see them then routinely applied in clinical practice. And finally, also to really try to have a better understanding and better management and prevention of shortages, which is something that is consuming quite a lot of the healthcare professionals at this moment. So I will conclude here, Agnes.
Thank you very much, Ivana. I think you still have one question. You're not finished?
Yes. No, I'm not. So we have, are you engaging healthcare professionals and patients for review of messages for EMA social networking? Good question. No, we are not at this moment, and it has to be it has to do with available resources at the moment. It's an area where we need to develop further in terms of also having more listening of social media. But in terms of the review of our posts, we have not gone to that level. However, we have had certain campaigns which have a social media component where we have been able to engage in the review. So we don't do it systematically, but we do it for certain campaigns, for example, around antimicrobial resistance, for example, around vaccines. So in certain areas, we've been able to do that. When time allows us, in terms of the dimension and the amplitude of the campaign, we will involve patients and healthcare professionals in the review. But we do not do that systematically for every post that we put on social media.
Thank you very much, Ivana. I think this was quite a fantastic presentation. We now have reached the end of this session and actually our program for this year of engaging with accessing candidate countries and potential candidate countries, that's the proper term. And thank you very much for putting the patient at the core of also this training and these discussions. Thank you for all of the audience. I know many of you are still present, and thank you very much for being really actively participating. This was really also for us quite an interesting exercise, and thank you very much. So we will talk to you in 2021 for the next session. In the meantime, you will receive all the presentation. You will receive also additional responses that we are not able to provide immediately. You will receive a few links, and we will also you will also receive, sorry, I'm tiring also, receive the evaluation of this training. Please be critical because we want to do a better job next time. And so thank you very much and goodbye to everybody.